Would I do a PhD again? Thinking about the highs, lows, the journey, the answer to that isn't straightforward, but we'll get to that in the end. So, a couple of weeks ago, I wrote a blog around this topic and it got a lot of traction. And people asked me to dive a bit deeper. So, I'm going to do this in this video. Just for a bit of context, I did my PhD at age 24 at the University of Manchester. And looking back at it now, the first thing I would have done differently is I wish I did my PhD a bit later. I know a lot of people who say, no, but you got it out the way at a young age. That's actually better. But I feel like having more professional experience would have helped me shape my PhD a bit more, whereas I was very reliant on my supervisor's expertise to shape the PhD. So looking back at it now, I would have probably done the PhD a few years later. I feel 24 was a bit young. Not saying the same applies to everybody. Every field is different. Everybody's experiences is different. But having a few years of professional experience, I feel like it makes you grounded and you're able to strike the balance between theory and practical application a bit better. So that would be the first thing I would have done differently. The second thing is I wish I enjoyed life a lot more. Now, a lot of people will say, but you're there on a PhD. You're there to do your research, get your degree. You're not there to have fun and play around, which is true to some extent. But looking back now, I really didn't get my work-life balance right. I was literally work mornings, evenings, weekends, holidays, everything, to the point where all days were the same. It didn't matter what day of the week. In my mind, it was all the same. You go in, you do your PhD work until you're exhausted, and then you leave. And looking back at that, I really regret it because I compare myself to my PhD colleagues at the time, and they enjoyed life a lot more. And whilst, yes, I did get my publication sooner and I finished my PhD sooner, but they got there eventually as well. So the outcome is still the same. Everybody's going to get there in the end. But the only difference is, I feel at least, is they got to enjoy their life more. They really got to dive into this experience of being in a different city and a different country and trying to explore things a bit more outside of the PhD. Whereas for me, it was very linear. It was just work on the PhD and that's it. Now I understand some of that is circumstantial because they were married and they had kids. So kind of by design, they had to have a work-life balance. They didn't have the opportunity to just be working day and night on their PhD. But yeah, I just still feel like they had that balance, and maybe I could have been more intentional about having work-life balance and trying to spend more time outside the PhD, because as I said, at the end of the day, they got there, I got there. Okay, I got there quicker, but it's the same outcome. Everybody got the PhD. So I would have much rather had a bit more life experiences outside the PhD. But anyways, looking at my notes here, the third thing, I would have probably been a bit more open to non-academic path. So I went in with the mentality of academic or bust. I didn't entertain any seminar, any job opportunity, any talk about something that was non-academic. My mindset was, we're going all in. And I feel like that isn't the best mindset to have. Now, I know I did end up in academia, so arguably you can say it worked. But I feel like having an open mind is good. And I always advise, particularly now for new PhDs, I tell them, have a look at the market. Keep your opportunities open. You might end up in industry. You might end up as an entrepreneur. Basically, it could be anything you want it to be. So by having that open mindset, you also look at things differently, because when it's academic or bust, you have very kind of tunnel vision where everything is about the project. Everything is about papers. Everything is about conference presentations. Everything is about the academic world. Whereas when you have a bit more of a varied mindset where, hey, I can end up anywhere, I'm open to all possibilities, you look at things differently. You look at opportunities differently. You start to think, how can I utilize these skills in the workforce regardless of where I end up? So having that different mindset, I think, is really important, and being just more open to the idea that you can end up anywhere and pick up skills that you need. for whatever it is, whether you're going to be an entrepreneur, an academic, and go into industry, go into the workforce. So I feel like I would have, if I had to go back, it would have been nice to have a bit more of an open mindset. I'm starting to do that in the last year and a half or so. So better late than never. But if I started sooner, it would have been better. Then moving on to the next point, I would have probably built a social media presence a lot early. Now, I started my social media journey as a creator a year and a half ago, mainly on LinkedIn, and things just took off. Like opened up a lot of opportunities for me, a lot of enjoyable interactions with my community and so on. And I really wish I would have started earlier. So I do see people right now on social media who start to make a social media presence whilst they've just started their PhD. And I'm like, they're on the right track. That's the way to do it, because building trust and building that relationship with the social media audience, it takes time. So I kind of wish I would have started a bit sooner. Now, to those of you out there, when I say build a social media presence, it doesn't mean as a creator, because I know a lot of people, they're not interested in creating content or putting themselves out there, but just mingling with people who you want to mingle with online, having those discussions, commenting, for example. I know a lot of PhD candidates who are on my radar because they're always commenting, they're curious, they have that online presence, because a lot of people don't know this. Like, even when you finish your PhD, it's not like all of a sudden everyone's going to notice. You could have done the most amazing research in the world, but nobody's going to notice. So building an online presence where you're kind of talking to people of interest, maybe eventually every now and then posting something or an update on your journey, I just feel like that would have been better. Now, there was a reason why I was very intentional about not being on social media, and I'm going to jump on to that later on. But looking back now, I still feel I should have started a bit earlier. So moving on to the next point, I think I would have definitely not overlooked the challenges of doing a PhD abroad and alone. So when I got the PhD offer, I didn't even think of it. I was like, University of Manchester, it's a really good university. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Let's go. And I really overlooked the difficulties of being abroad alone. Like, the amount of times I felt isolated, lonely, stuck. The amount of times I had that moment of, what on earth am I doing here? Especially when the PhD is slow and things are not moving. And then in the family group, you see your family, they're sending you pictures, they're all together, and you're like, well, have I done the right thing? And a PhD is quite a long duration. It's minimum 3 years and longer. So I always tell people to think of that carefully. Like, it's something to consider, It's a sacrifice. And a lot of people get grounded in, is the PhD difficult? Is it easy? But they don't really ask the question of the difficulty of going abroad and alone and whatnot. And for me, this might be controversial, I think this aspect is more challenging than the intellectual aspect itself, because we're human beings at the end of the day. So it can be difficult to do a PhD abroad. It can get very isolating, and that's why a lot of people sometimes don't continue, not necessarily because of the intellectual challenge, but more because of the mental aspect behind it. So these were kind of the things that I wish I did. But now I'm going to talk about the things which I'm proud I did and I wouldn't change. First, publishing all of my papers during my PhD. And I know there's a lot of rhetoric online about, should universities focus on publications during PhDs? Should they force people? Blah, blah, blah. I get it. But personally, for me, I would not change that. I knew from the start I wanted to publish as soon as we started. I told my supervisor, we're going to publish as we go. I'm going to write the alternative thesis format, which is PhD by publications, because I had no intention of writing papers after I was done with my PhD, papers relative to my PhD topic. And that was the best decision ever, because by the time you reach your thesis defense and you've written your thesis, you are so done with your PhD topic. And the last thing I wanted to do was to be writing papers after I was done. So I loved that it was just complete closure. I published my 4 PhD papers, I defended my thesis, and it was game over. I didn't have to look at it again. So I'm a big believer of publish during your PhD. Don't leave it too late. So I would definitely not have changed that. Another thing, which might be a bit contradicting what I said earlier, but I was very intentional on avoiding the social media because of the negativity. Now, unfortunately, the academic world or the academic vibe online is very negative. If you have a feed and you follow a lot of academics or PhD students or whatever, you will see that the feed is very negative. A lot of it is whining, a lot of it is complaining, a lot of it is just bashing the system, bashing people. And I understand academia is not perfect at all. And I actually did a video the other week about how academia is broken. However, I thought to myself, the PhD itself is already challenging. I'm abroad, I'm alone. There's a lot of uncertainty about my future. And the last thing I need is to get involved in those negative online discussions around academia. And even though I wasn't very active online, but still some of the stuff echo in my head. There was a lot of rhetoric around the whole game is rigged. Oh, you're an international student. You're just a cash cow. They're never going to hire you in the UK because visas are difficult. They're expensive. Why would they employ you? So all that kind of thing could really put you in a dark place or really get you to not believe in yourself. So for me, I made a very conscious effort where I'm not going to get involved in any of that. I'm just going to focus on doing my thing and just trying to get better every day and let it be. We'll see where the chips fall. I'm going to do the best I could, and then we see where the chips fall, rather than getting caught into that negative rhetoric online. And I still see it right now. And unfortunately, there's actually a lot of popular social media content creators who push that narrative, which once again, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it doesn't do people a favor. And there's also two things going on. One of them is those people that are pushing that rhetoric, a lot of them have negative experiences and then they generalize and they say that all of academia is like that, which it's not. Academia, like every other sector, has the good and the bad. And also, a lot of these people, particularly the popular content creators, which are saying pushing people out of academia, they couldn't make it. So because they couldn't achieve it, they want to sell other people the idea that you can achieve it and follow me. I'm just being honest. And that kind of bothers me sometimes. Now, once again, not everyone's going to make it. Academia is broken. There's a lot of limited job opportunities and so on. But listening to that being echoed on and on is not going to do me a favor. So I just said, I'm going to stay and focus on myself. And to be honest, it kind of did pay off. I did end up getting that academic job at age 30. And I feel like if I had been involved in all of these negative discussions, the doubt would have multiplied by 10. And the last thing probably, which I feel is the most rewarding thing and I don't regret about my PhD, is the character building. So a lot of people don't think about that, but being alone abroad, having to do something intellectually demanding, and then having to put up with the highs, the lows, constant rejections, constant criticisms of your work, feeling like you're overworked and not recognized, but still pushing through. All of that has built so much character, resilience, being able to manage my time, depend on myself. And I feel that's the most rewarding aspect of the PhD. And I even joke about it sometimes. I'm like, I came into the PhD as a 24-year-old boy and I came out a man because I just had to go through so much. And the thing with the PhD, a lot of the onus is on you. And your supervisors will always tell you that. It's your PhD at the end of the day. You're going to have to drive it. You're going to have to manage all the chaos in and outside of the workplace or the lab or whatever your PhD is. And to come up on top after all of that really built a lot of character. So I think that's the most important thing for me, was the person I became having gone through that process, and I wouldn't change that for the world. So yeah, that is my video. My answer is honestly, would I do a PhD again? I definitely would not do another PhD, but I don't regret it. And if I were to do it again, I would do some things differently, as I alluded to earlier. But yeah, that's my content for the week. What about you? Would you do a PhD again?